What's up, guys? This is Hammer Hurricane back with another video. And today I'm going to be talking about something that has caused me a lot of anger, a lot of resentment. You know, these are thoughts that you don't want to think about because they take you to dark places. But it's a reality that I can no longer ignore, right? And what I'm going to be talking about today is power. And power in regards to black people. Now, here's the thing, guys, right? When I say black people, I'm not just referring to, people who, black people, for example, in America or the black diaspora. I am also referring to the black collective, right? Specifically, black Africans, once again, right? Black people all across the world, whether we want to admit or not, right, we all descend from black Africans. Now, me personally, I am a first generation immigrant from West Africa. So I guess I'm a sort of first, I'm a West African immigrant, right? So I came straight out of the continent, right? But for the rest of the black diaspora, whether they be in Haiti or Jamaica or in America or even in South America, right? Descend directly from West Central Africa, right? And when I was a kid growing up, right, one thing I will always hear, from especially whites and non-black people, was this idea of black people being low IQ, black people being an inferior group, an inferior race. I would hear this a lot. And of course, you push aside, just being hateful, whatever, right? But I think one day I asked myself, okay, you know what? Instead of me just pushing aside, let me ask a question. Obviously, I don't believe that black people are genetically inferior, right? But what is it about black people as a group that causes these other groups of people to view us or to view blacks collectively as low IQ or as an inferior people, right? We know genetically we're not inferior, but what is it about black people as a collective globally that wherever you go, people always tend to look down on you, view you in a negative way, right? Now, not to say, okay, maybe because it is the economics, maybe it's because of Western Germany, and that's very surface level. I believe the answer is very clear. It's actually been in front of me the whole time, right? Black people do not want power. Black people collectively don't value power. And when I say that, right, a lot of people are going to interpret it in many ways. Now, let me ask you a question. Let me just ask this question, right? When somebody says power, what does power mean, right? Power is the ability to superimpose yourself on other groups of people. Power is the ability to impose your will irregardless of morality. There is no morality in power. It doesn't matter if what the person is doing is right or wrong. It doesn't matter if what the group is doing right. The question is, do they have the power to impose their will irregardless of morality? And are they willing to do whatever it takes to obtain that power so they can impose their will irregardless of morality? There is this phrase that I came across, and it said, in this world, right, those who possess power impose their will on others, and those who do not lose everything. And I believe that not IQ, not, black people, right? The reason why black people globally are viewed the way they're viewed, the reason why they're viewed as low IQ is because we don't have the same ambition for power, the same sort of survival instincts to dominate that other groups of people have. And you see it. I have talked about how wherever you go, whether it's black Africans, wherever black people are, black people tend to be so loving and so opening and so generous. Like we are so quick to turn the other cheek. But other groups of people don't operate like this. Other groups of people do not operate like that. Now, of course, I did some research into it right now. Of course, some people say, hey, the reason why black people are such a docile group, I guess, or such a, welcoming group of people, is because of the environment, right? Europeans, for example, they came from a very harsh environment. They only had one growing season. If they didn't prepare for themselves, if they did not prepare, and if they did not grow, they would die. That was it, right? Freezing temperature. Like, they came from a harsh environment. Very few resources, right? No, small continent. And so it created this sort of survival instinct, right? And this sort of ambition, right? Which caused them to go out there. Well, I think it's a reason why white people, are so vicious a group, right? And it's not just them. Like, you look at, for example, the Japanese, right? Same thing too. No, if you look at Japan, right? Japan, so it's a harsh water too, right? And the people there, very vicious, right? Very tough, very ambitious, right? Look at the Arabs. They come from a very harsh environment, right? The desert. What I'm trying to say, the groups of people that have dominated globally, whether it's Europeans, whether it's Asian groups like the Japanese or Chinese, or even places like that, or the Arabs, what typically you have in common is not that they're genetically superior, is that they came from harsh environments. And those harsh environments caused them to develop a certain survival instinct. Those harsh environments caused them to become ambitious, right? Right? To become ambitious in order for them to survive. And, when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, right? I'm going to give you an example. I was, I grew up in a very, I don't want to say poor, but, my family essentially was very low income, right? And so because of this, because I grew up without having much, it created a drive in me. And you see this, right? Kids who are born in low-income families, right? They have a certain drive about them because they don't have that much. They have a certain survival, a certain ambition. But when you look at kids who've been born in good families, they don't have the same ambition. It's not the same. You take a kid. That's the reason why we have this stereotype of the spoiled rich kid, because we've seen this, right? The kid who grew up in a nice family world, right, is spoiled, right? Does not have the same ambition, the same drive of a kid who came from a tough environment. And I believe that this sort of environmental effect is what happens to groups of people globally. And so because black people lived in a part of the world, in sub-Saharan Africa, right, where it was good weather, there was a lot of reasons, right? Remember, right, Africa has multiple growing seasons. So, hey, even if you mess up this harvest, a couple of months later, you have the harvest, right? So it created a very pleasant environment. Right? I'm like, it's sunny all the time. You can easily roam and go places. Because black people came from an environment, right, that was not as harsh. This is how we developed this sort of culture of being so opening, of being so docile. Being so docile. Because when you're in an environment that's easy to tame, not harsh on you, right, you become docile as a group of people, as a person. But when you come from an environment that's harsh, you become more ambitious. You develop a certain survival instinct. And I think this is the reason why, when we look at the world today, right, we see how, yes, obviously, Africa is the creator of human civilization. That's fine. But when we look across, we've seen the past couple of thousands of years that, the places that have really been able to dominate have been around the globe. Whether it's China and the Silk Road, whether it's the Japanese, whether it's the Arab expansion and how they came in there, in Somalia, into North Africa, right? We're looking at Europeans. Come on. we see that the groups that came from these harsh environments, it created a drive that made them more ambitious, and it slowly started to dominate. And I believe that this explains why black people, in my opinion, are in the position the position they're in right now. Is that you have a group of people that came from an environment where the resources were already there, that came from an environment where they didn't have to put that much work to survive, right? The environment was always pleasant to them, right? And so it made them docile. It made them not as ambitious, right? When these people come into contact with folks who come from harsher environments, who are much more vicious, who are much more ambitious, who have a deeper survival instinct, you can't win, because they are willing to do whatever. Because here's the thing, right? Look, a lot of black people, right? We think about all of the atrocities that Europeans have done. We think about all the stuff that Arabs have done, right? We think about the Chinese, right, and the Japanese. We think about how these other groups are willing to go to such an extent to dominate. And for a lot of black people, we don't understand it because, once again, we don't have that mentality. I said, look, the reason you don't have that mentality because you don't come from a harsh environment the way they do, right? And so you're not willing to go that far. You're not willing to be that extreme. And I believe that black Africans, but black people, right, need to understand that this mentality is going to put, if this mentality is not fixed, if this mentality is not changed, black people risk being left behind forever. No, Native Americans are gone, right? They lost. Like, indigenous people in South America were genocided. Indigenous people were genocided, right? That's over with. And what I'm viewing is that the only other group outside of them that could potentially end up is black Africans or black people globally. And we're saying, like, Argentina actually genocided its black population. Right? Come on, man. And so when I see black Africans and I say, but look, you guys better start changing that mentality. Because you're interacting with other groups of people that will do whatever it takes to be at the top. But you want to be hugging. You want to be loving. That doesn't work. And by the way, this brings me back to the example of South Africa, right? I have a love and hate relationship when it comes to black South Africans, right? I love the fact that black South Africans were able to survive apartheid and they fought through it. But I hate the fact that black South Africans have essentially sat back and allowed the white minority to dominate them. And recently I was on a panel where I heard Tutu Niger, right? He's a man from Nigeria. This Nigerian dude talking about how, he would have no problem being a slave he would have no problem being a colony, his nation being a colony to the West, as long as it got benefits. He's from Nigeria saying this. And what that tells me is that maybe I've been going too hard on black South Africans. Because once again, although I respected the fact that black South Africans, fight against apartheid, I hated the fact they will sit back and allow the white minority to dominate them. And I know why they're doing it, right? Because from their point of view, they very much understand that the only reason why South Africa is the most industrialized country in the African continent is because of the whites there, right? Let's be honest here. South Africa technically is a white country. It's a white sort of state, right? Now, the only thing that separates South Africa and America is that in America, the indigenous population will be raised. In South Africa, the black indigenous population is still there. That's the only difference. But fundamentally, the country is run by the white minority. And black South Africans, they have essentially come to this agreement, okay, they have no problem playing a subordinate role to the whites as long as they get some economic benefits. That's the mentality black people have. You can have white people as a minority in the country. But they have such they have such an instinct for survival. They're so ambitious about maintaining power that they will find all kinds of cunning ways to maintain control, even when they're 8%. And a population that's 80%, a majority, they'll willfully sit back and allow them to dominate them. Oh well, as long as we're getting some economic benefits, why not? Now let me ask you a question. Do you think Europeans would ever allow a black minority to run their countries in exchange for some economic benefits? No, they will have you out of there. Quick. Because Europeans they've been killing each other for hundreds of years. They have no problem genociding each other. Look at the war in Ukraine. They will blow up another white person like it's nothing. So if they can blow up and genocide other white people, if they can commit the Holocaust, you think they care about you? You think they won't put hands on you? You think they'll allow a black minority to control a European state? In the United States, right, they're still trying to undermine black Americans. Even now. Even as the population is shrinking. But anyway, before I continue, right, I'm going to go ahead and play this video. And sorry, guys, I know it's a struggle. It's a struggle stream, right? It's a struggle recording. But I want to play. This video is of Ramaphosa, who is the president of Africa, right? He went to a meeting in France. So France essentially had a meeting where they invited nations around the globe, and the whole idea was to reform the financial system, right? Hear him talk about how, before I play the video, right, let me give you some context. So what has happened is that Europeans, right, through climate initiatives, they have been able to convince many black African nations to not exploit their own gas, their own resources. Say, oh, don't build pipelines, don't extract those, right? We'll pledge $100 billion a year. And of course, black people, as usual, right, being so loving and so kind and so accepting. Well, you say you'll give us money? Yeah, what could go wrong? And of course, black Africans trusted them. But let's be honest about that. And they just found out it was a lie. Right? And so he's going to talk about it. But anyway, let me play it so we can talk about it. Let me play it.
You will have heard President Sisi talking about the 100 billion that was promised in Paris. President Sassou Nguesso yesterday as well also spoke about it at the dinner. Now, there is that issue that a number of the commitments that have been made have not really been fully lived up to. But before I get into details, let me immediately say that we recognize the many initiatives that have been put on the table, and a number of countries here have done so. Germany has gone out of the way to put a number of initiatives, and the US has also done a number of things. But there have been times when we felt like we were beggars. I played a key role as chair of the African Union during the COVID period. We felt like we were beggars when it came to vaccines availability, when we felt we needed access to vaccines, and the Northern Hemisphere countries had bought all the vaccines in the world, and they were hogging them. And they didn't want to release them at the time when we needed them most. And we felt like we were begging. And at times it felt like they would just be droppings from the table, that yes, we will give you that and that. And let me tell you something that generated a lot of resentment. We resented that, and it got worse when we said we want to manufacture our own vaccines. And when we went to the WTO, there was a lot of resistance, enormous resistance. And we kept saying, what is more important, life or profits by your big pharmaceutical companies? And that too, I must tell you now, generated and deepened that disappointment and resentment on our part, because we felt like life in the Northern Hemisphere is much more important than life in the global South. And these are issues that need to be addressed. And I'm glad that we are all seated here like this, because we've got to get to the heart of these matters and address them. Now, I come to promises that have been made. And Chancellor Scholz was saying, we've got to walk the talk. Yes, we want to see the talk being walked. President Sassou Nguesso yesterday said at the dinner, $100 billion was promised per year. And he was saying, I've never seen that. And many of us will testify that that $100 billion has never really been made available. And this should stand out as something that needs to be addressed, because sometimes we sit at conferences like this and say, yes, we'll make this available, and we believe you. We believe you, but now the tire must hit the tar. We must now see action flowing from that. Now, I want to then talk about something very practical. President Sassou Nguesso raised.
Now, the reason why I played that video, and typically when I make my recordings, I typically don't like doing that because it seems unprofessional, but fuck it, I don't care. Fuck that shit. Think about what you just saw. Because when I hop on panels and I talk about Black Africans need to start understanding that outside of the continent, no one cares about your fucking tribes. And this is coming from someone who is a West African immigrant. Right? My parents, growing up, we'll talk about the home, I still remember the home country when I was around like 8 or 7, right? But I realized that, yeah, all of those tribal affiliations may matter on the African continent, but when you leave, it doesn't mean anything. And it's like this video, this conference, right, was held in Paris. Nations from all across over there. And here we have the black man. Like, because if you look at that room, right, everyone else, right, the Asians, the whites, everyone is there, right? And they're all in a better position. The only group of people, the only group of men that have to beg, and it's like, but Ramaphosa, why are you begging though? Why are you begging? Because what he was essentially saying in the video, right, is that Black Africans, when they would interact with Europeans, when they would interact with non-Black countries, they would do it in good faith. They would open their arms. They would trust them. He said, right, we believed you. Why did you believe them? So you mean the same Europeans that colonized you, the same Europeans that put up right, now they're telling you, hey, don't build infrastructure. Don't exploit your own resources, right? Don't use your own resources, right? Trust us and we'll give you $100. And you believe them? Whose fault is that? That's not their fault. You're a fool to believe them. But see, this is what I mean when I say black people collectively. Because we came from an environment that was not as harsh, we don't have the same survival instincts. We don't have the same ambition that other groups have. Yeah, these other groups are willing to lie, steal, and do whatever they can right to you. They told you straight up, yeah, we don't care if you guys are dying. We're not letting these vaccines go to Africa. We're not letting you get, we don't care. Dude, watching this conference video almost made me cry because it's so embarrassing. You have a conference of groups of men from all across the world, right, represent the countries. And the only group of men that is crying and complaining and talking about how, oh my God, is a black man. And you have your, black Americans at least have an excuse because they're a minority group. You have countries, nation states. When I look at the African continent, right, let's look, for example, at North Africa. North African nations, essentially, they are the minority, right? And yet North African nations were smart enough to come together and join the Arab League. So even though they're a minority, because they have a collective identity, they're able to dominate the continent. But if you look at the map, right, black African nations make up more than 2/3 of the continent. If black African nations came together and made a black coalition the same way you have an Arab League, they will dominate the entire continent. Both the North Africa and the Horn of Africa will be surrounded. But yet, you're not even doing that. Why is it that North African nations, which are a minority continent, have enough sense to come together and make racial blocks, right? Look, they have their own, obviously they're going to have their own internal battles, but they're all a part of the Arab League. They all identify as Arabs. In fact, I'm going to give you an example. Right now, Egypt, right, is having this dispute with Ethiopia in regards to the Ethiopian dam, because Ethiopia is trying to build a dam on the Nile, right? Egypt literally said that the reason Egypt, right, went to the Arab League and said the Arab League needs to help Egypt, stop Ethiopia from building the dam because the water of the Nile is Arab water. But wait a minute. Egypt is in North Africa. It doesn't matter, right? They and most North African countries, not all, are a part of the Arab. They all identify under a collective racial identity called Arab. It doesn't matter, right? And this is what empowers them. So even though they're a minority on the continent, because they're united, they can dominate. But you, the black man, who is the overall majority, you can't even unite when it benefits you. There is no black equivalent of the Arab League. There is no black equivalent of the European Union. And no, the African Union does not count. Because the European Union is largely based on racial undertones. Don't get it twisted. Okay? The European Union is based on racial undertones. The African Union is not. Okay? Because a black equivalent of the European Union would be an African Union, but only of black nations. Right? And maybe I'll give you an example, right? The African Union literally rejected Haiti, but yet allows North African nations who are part of the Arab League to join. This is the mentality black people have. We're so willing to hug everyone, open our arms to the people, even though stab us in the back. And this kind of goes back to what I said. Look, the reason why, and this goes back to the beginning of it, right? The reason why other groups of people, you black people as low IQ, as subordinate group, is because we have demonstrated time and time again that no matter how much evil, no matter how much atrocities is done to us, whether it's in Argentina, whether it's in America, it doesn't matter what it is, right? Black people will always turn the other cheek and say, I forgive you. I mean, isn't that correct? Let's be honest. I'm like, the only exception maybe is what? Zimbabwe, right? Mugabe said help, but even Mugabe, you could make the argument that Mugabe was pushed. He had no choice. Black Africans need to recognize that the reason why you have to go to these conferences and beg I'm like, think about how embarrassing that video was. Seeing black leaders of nation states in an international conference begging the world. I just, what? And you're complaining that other groups of people are taking advantage of you. Of course they are. Of course white Europeans are lying to you. Of course other groups are going to... What are you talking about? So you're telling me that you guys, black people, black Africans are so welcoming, right? They're so docile that they actually will take the word of these other good people. You're more willing to trust a North African, you're more willing to trust a European than you are the country of Haiti? And you wonder why you're at the bottom. Black people fundamentally, in my opinion, don't want power. Black people globally want to be liked. Prove me wrong. Change my mind. I have come to that conclusion, right? We don't want power. We don't want to do what it takes to have power. We don't want to commit the atrocities that are needed to have power. We just want to be loved. Yes, my family's being slaughtered. Yes, my wife is being raped. Yes, all these horrible things are happening to me. But you know what? At least, I'm not seeking revenge. At least I'm trying to be moral, right? I am not going to bring justice for my people. No, I'm going to turn the cheek and look and say, you know what? I forgive you. Stab me again. That's the behavior. Look, there's nothing wrong with forgiveness, but here's the issue, right? Forgiveness should be done after, right? After revenge. After you bring justice, after you make them pay, then you can forgive. But you should never have a situation where people can abuse you, right? You don't get any kind of justice, but then all of a sudden you want to forgive and love. And you wonder why these people don't respect you. I don't respect you. And as a black person, it's like, dude, I can't even respect black Africans anymore. And I'm a black African. Seeing that video. You've been cucked. Right? Think about how all these other groups of people are looking at you, right? Man, look at these blacks. We came in there, we robbed them, we raped them, and they're still trying to be our friends? I'm like, come on. Of course they don't respect us. I believe that black people right now, we are in an existential crisis. Because Native Americans are gone. And it looks like the people who are at the bottom of the globe right now are the blacks, right? We have an opportunity, though. Because with the rise of China, with the global economy shifting towards Asia, we are entering the Asian century, right? Now, this century is going to be the Asian century, but the next century is going to be the African century, right? The good thing about this, though, right, is that once the Asian century is realized, right, which will be by 2050, by the middle of the century, right, the top 20 economies in the world will be in Asia, right, and we'll be at that point we will officially be the Asian century. This will create a situation in which the only region in the world left that has not industrialized will be Africa. Africa will be the last frontier. And so naturally, you're going to start seeing capital, investment go to the economy. Because once again, they're going to be the last region of the world that's on tap. Now, here's the thing. This is where it matters, right? If black Africans do not change their mentality, if black people do not develop a survival instinct, a killer instinct, an ambitious instinct, if we do not change our mentality by 21,000, what's going to happen is that by the time the global economy goes to Africa, we're going to fumble the ball. And if we miss this opportunity, the black race is over. Now, let me say that right now. You're not going to bounce back. Because it's going to take hundreds of years before you get an opportunity. So yeah, right now an opportunity is coming, right? Asia is slowly taking over. Asia will be the center of the global economy. Asia will become the center of the global economy by the middle of the century, right? Which will mean that you will be the only region left that has not been tapped into. Which would mean that by the next century, you will have the opportunity to make 21,000 the African century. But once again, right? Think of for example, China and Mao Zedong. When the United States reached out to China, right, and offered China, the economic deal, China had the opportunity. If China would have said, fuck it, we're not going to take a deal, we're just going to side with the Russians, they would have lost their chance. Because they were ready and they made the right moves, they're what they are today. But once again, that's because they had the right mentality. If black Africans do not develop, if black Africans and if black people do not develop a mentality of a survival instinct, a killer instinct, an ambitious instinct, we will not be able to take advantage of the opportunity, and we could potentially end up like Native Americans. A group of people that will become so left behind that you'll essentially be extinct. Let's be honest here. So, before I let you, so my thing is, well, look, black people need to come we have to come globally to a conclusion. We have to come to an agreement. Do we want power? Are we willing to kill for power? Are we willing to torture for power? Are we willing to do whatever it takes for power? Or do we just want to be liked? Because if you just want to be liked, then that means you need to accept being the slave position. You need to accept begging in conferences, because power and morality are not the same. To have power is to disregard morality. Those who possess power impose their will on others, and those who don't lose everything. That's how it works. But with that being said, y'all, I'm going to leave it there. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hammer out.